At the age of 27, Napoleon Bonaparte took command of the Army of Italy. The French had not made much headway in the Italian theater, which was a secondary front to both the French and the Allies. Morale was low, but Bonaparte saw potential in the campaign. In a speech to his soldiers headquartered at Nice, "Soldiers, you are hungry and naked. The government owes you much but can give you nothing. The patience and courage which you have displayed amongst these rocks are admirable, but they bring you no glory. Not a glimmer falls upon you. I will lead you into most fertile plains on earth. Rich provinces, opulent towns, all shall be at your disposal. There you'll find honor. There you'll find riches. There you will find glory." Bonaparte would be facing two separate armies, both under the Austrian commander-in-chief Johann Bewley. Bewley was a competent but indecisive commander, and his indecisiveness would cost the Austrians early on in the campaign. On the left, there was the Piedmontese army, 20,000 strong under General Colley. These men, supported by an Austrian detachment under General Provera, stretched from Cuneo in the west to Seva in the east. And on the right was the Austrian army. The Austrian army had 35,000 men in total. General Argenteau was stationed near a quay with 11,500 men. Bewley had a total of 20,000 men. 10,000 were under Generals Ukazovich and Siebodendorf in forward positions. The other 10,000 were under Bewley's direct command and left in reserve at the supply base at Alessandria. The French army was spread out in the Ligurian mountains. Unlike the Austrians, they were not well supplied and faced starvation. Reduced by desertion, sickness, and casualties, Bonaparte could only field 37,000 men. The advance guard under André Massena formed the right of the French army and comprised of a division under General Laharpe, located near Savona, and another division under General Maynier, located south of Savona. A brigade from Laharpe's forces under Brigade General Cervoni were stationed at Voltri. According to David Chandler, it was Massena that would be in direct control of Maynier's forces. The center of the French army was held by Augereau at Finale, and the left wing was held by Sérier at Ormea. On the extreme left, divisions of General Macquart and Garnier occupied the Col de Tende. Their men in total comprised of 7,000 troops, and their sole purpose was to protect the army's lines of communication to France. On paper, the French were outnumbered by over 14,000 men. To exploit this, Bewley designed a pincer move on Massena's advance guard. The columns under Ukazovich and Siebodendorf would fall on Cervoni's exposed brigade at Voltri. Meanwhile, Argenteau would advance on Laharpe, separate him from Massena, and occupy these forces until Bewley and the rest of the Allied army concentrated. Then they would drive the French back into Provence. Bonaparte's plan was simple: separate the Allies and force the Piedmontese out of the war. He was aware the Piedmontese were war-weary and could easily be bullied into a peace treaty. To isolate Colley, he would use the armies of Augereau, Massena, and Laharpe to attack and establish the central position between both armies. He would then use a small force to hold the Austrians, while the remainder of his forces would destroy Colley. Meanwhile, Sérier from Ormea would hold Colley's attention, and Cervoni would serve as another distraction on the opposite flank. Looking at a map, Bonaparte's finger landed on the city of Carcaire. Holding the city would be the key to severing the link between the Piedmontese and the Austrians. Bewley sent two columns under Siebodendorf to fall on Cervoni's isolated brigade at Voltri, while Ukazovich went west to reinforce Argenteau. At the same time, Argenteau was sent to attack the main French supply base at Savona. Although the initiative was taken by the Austrians, two important French victories at Montenotte and Voltri set the tone of the campaign and allowed Bonaparte to respond. At Voltri, Cervoni was able to avoid the trap set by Siebodendorf and began a remarkable fighting retreat along the coast. At Montenotte, Argenteau ran into a French holding force commanded by Colonel Rapon. Outnumbered, Rapon heroically declared to his men that we must conquer or die. After several attempts to take the redoubt, Argenteau was forced to retreat for the night. Bonaparte immediately recognized Bewley's mistake. Bewley had revealed his position, and the Austrian commander's main army would not be able to assist in the defense of Carcaire, the key to the central position. Bonaparte saw his chance and acted quickly. Bonaparte would not have to deviate too much from his original plan and set out on overwhelming his opponent with 3 divisions in the Carcaire region. Cervoni's brigade, retreating from the east, would have rejoined Messina near Savona. Then the forces of Massena-La Harpe would march into the Montenotte region. Meanwhile, from Finale, a division under Augereau would march in the same direction. Bewley's forces, still too far away to matter, were marching towards Argenteau via the Ligurian passes from a key. Ukasevich was still marching towards Socello, hoping to meet up with Argenteau at Dego on April 15th. Remember this because it would be very important soon. Argenteau was still in Montélegenneux, making no headway against the French in the region. Unknown to him, La Harpe and Massena were rapidly converging on his position. Bonaparte's first battle as commander-in-chief had finally arrived. Bonaparte amassed anywhere between 9,000 and 14,000 men up against Argenteau's army that ranged anywhere between 7,000 and 9,000 men. Coming from the south, La Harpe placed cannons overlooking Montélegenneux and began firing on the Austrians below. Argenteau, knowing that taking the strong point was now impossible, fell back on Montenotte Superior. Massena, with Bonaparte present, attacked the right flank of Argenteau's army. The Austrians defended gallantly, but were completely crushed when La Harpe fell on their left flank at Monteprat and were shattered. After casualties and desertions, Argenteau's army had been reduced to 700 men. In total, Argenteau lost 2,500 men and 12 guns, while the French only lost 800 men. Argenteau retreated to Dego, hoping to link with Bewley, who would be arriving any day. Augereau's columns arrived at midnight and the central position was established at Carcaire, but Bonaparte had to face a new problem. There was no confirmation that the full Austrian force had been engaged at Montenotte. He had to decide whether to follow Argenteau to Dego or continue on to Colli. He ultimately decided that half of Massena's division should hold the town of Dego to prevent the Austrians from helping the Piedmontese. La Harpe was sent to Cairo in support, while Augereau's army in the second half of Massena's should march on Sèvres for a concentration of 25,000 men. From Ormea, Serrier was instructed to march on Colli's southern flank at Sèvres. Henri Stengel, who was commander of the cavalry, was to stay at Carcaire to reinforce either flank. Augereau fought several small skirmishes against Provera in the Malissimo region, but Provera retreated to the ruined castle of Caseria. The French assaulted the castle, but could not make any headway. At Dego, Massena found the town to be held by a much sizable force of Austrians. Bonaparte instructed Massena to halt until Caseria had fallen. Thus, Bonaparte loses a valuable 24 hours. Bonaparte keeps a brigade under Augereau to watch Provera at Caseria and took the rest of his forces along with La Harpe to assist Massena. Argenteau had to hold Dego long enough for Bewley to arrive, which should take 2 days. He scrambles to bolster his forces before the French counterattack. However, the French army of Massena, Bonaparte, La Harpe, and Stengel's cav arrived early on the 14th. Bonaparte had 12,000 men assaulting 6,000 Austrians in the town. Argenteau's forces were destroyed and fled to a quay. And there was more good news. The following day, Caseria falls in the west at the cost of 900 French lives. Massena was left in Dego. Bonaparte and La Harpe went west hoping to meet Serrier's division near Sèvres. In the early hours of the next morning, Massena's troops began an undisciplined sack of the town, searching for food and supplies. They would soon be punished for this, as they were surprised by 5 Austrian battalions under General Ukasevich. Ukasevich routed the French, who were largely drunk and unorganized. Massena narrowly escaped from the bed of a prostitute and had to flee in his pajamas. After the victory, Ukasevich began to fortify the town and await Bewley, who was to arrive the next day. This was a disaster for Bonaparte's right flank. He was forced to cancel his advance on Sèvres once again, as he feared that Ukasevich might be the advance guard of a larger Austrian force. La Harpe and the reserve were sent back to Dego to take the village, and at the cost of 1,000 French casualties, this was done so. Bonaparte expected Beaulieu to fall on Dego soon, so he began preparations to defend the city. And the day was spent regrouping the army and sending out patrols to find the Austrian troop movements. However, Beaulieu felt he was going to face a French counterattack and retreated to a quay to regroup. Now that he felt his right flank was secure, Bonaparte could turn his attention to the west, where Serrier and Augereau's advances drove Colli into the fortified position of Sèvres. On the 16th, La Harpe was left to garrison Dego, while Massena was moved to San Benedetto, where he could either fall on Beaulieu's flank if the latter decided to attack Dego or support Augereau on the other flank. At the same time, on the 16th, Augereau, with 8,000 men, began uncoordinated attacks on Colli's position at Sèvres. Colli, realizing that Beaulieu was in no position to support him, already began to withdraw from the city to an even stronger position in the angle formed by the confluence of the rivers Tenero and Corsaglia. Colli's rear guard fought gallantly, frustrating Augereau, who decided to hold off his attack and wait for Serrier to arrive. He lost 600 men at the Battle of Sèvres, and the Piedmontese lost 150 men. Bonaparte was furious that Colli escaped and strategized a new attack. He ordered Serrier to assault Colli's new position from the front, while Augereau advanced down the east bank of the Tenero. However, this operation failed as Augereau was unable to find a crossing over the Tenero to support Serrier, and the latter was repulsed. Bonaparte halted all attacks on Colli for the moment. La Harpe was ordered to leave one brigade at Cairo and march the rest of his troops to relieve Massena at San Benedetto. Massena was to take a central position between Serrier and Augereau in preparation for the grand assault on Saint-Michel. Bonaparte had amassed 17,500 French against 13,000 Piedmontese. The night before the 21st, General Colli decamped and fell back on Mondovi, the main Sardinian supply depot. Stengel and the cavalry pursued him, but was killed during a skirmish, thus costing the Army of Italy its most experienced cavalry officer. His death would not be in vain, as Colli was prevented from organizing the town's defense. On the morning of the 21st, an unexpected moment of heroism from old General Serrier led to the capture of the town. He organized his division into 3 columns, placing himself at the head of the central column, and led a heroic frontal attack against the Piedmontese. And the French overcame the enemy and took control of the town and much needed supplies. It was a major turning point in the war. With the capture of Mondovi, Bonaparte had reached the plains of the Piedmont and his logistical issues were solved. The French were out of the mountains and his army would not starve. On April 23rd, he began to advance on Turin. Massena and Augereau moved along the river Tenero with their flanks protected by Serrier and La Harpe, with each army being within a day's march to concentrate if needed. However, the Piedmontese will to resist was broken after Mondovi, and on the evening of April 23rd, Colli asked for an armistice. Bonaparte did not slow the march of his army and continued on to Turin. Massena was sent to occupy Cherasco, and Augereau was sent to Alba. These moves finally severed all communications with Beaulieu. With Beaulieu out of the way, Bonaparte moved his lines of communications from the Tenero Valley to the Col de Tende and ordered La Harpe to advance on a quay to distract Beaulieu. Now Bonaparte dictated terms to the Turin court. The fortresses of Alessandria, Sèvres, Cuneo, and Tortona were to be handed over. The French would have free passage through Piedmontese territory and permission to cross the River Po at Valenza, which would be very important in the next phase of the campaign. This was all approved on April 28th. In 10 days, Bonaparte accomplished more than any French general in the Italian theater of war. The campaigns of 1796 were his own blitzkrieg. Now that his flank and lines of communication were secured, he could focus completely on the Austrians. Bewley was on the run, looking to set up a defensive line behind the River Po. Bonaparte's lightning war shook the Austrians, but the job was not done yet.